I've started to notice a trend in the behaviors of what I'd call toxic people. Now, you may immediately be thinking, well, isn't it obvious to be able to pick out somebody who's toxic and somebody who's not toxic? Not really. You'd be surprised. Obviously, if you're sort of sensitized to it from being exposed to toxic people for such a great portion of your life, then you can pick them out of a crowd instantly. But for people who haven't really ran into what I'd call toxic people a lot, you can end up not even noticing that their behavior is downright toxic, and what results from this is a lot of trauma, a lot of pain, a lot of setbacks that can cause pain that lasts for years. So in this video, I want to emphasize some of the sort of telltale signs of toxic behavior. So to be completely honest with you guys, within the past 5 months, I've undergone a complete self-transformation, and I don't even know necessarily how it happened. All I know is it was like I clicked into this different state of awareness. I clicked into this different mode of perspective. And what it was prior to clicking into this different mode of perspective, I was endlessly loving and endlessly giving to everybody on the outside because I thought that's what kindness and compassion was to be endlessly giving to others. But what happened when I had this shift in perspective, this shift in awareness, was I realized that compassion isn't something that just goes out. Compassion is a field. It's a state of being in which I am included in equal proportion as everybody else. And what came with realizing this was realizing how much I've spent my life excluding myself from this field of compassion, thinking that what compassion was exclusive to something being given to other people. I thought compassion was when somebody treats me poorly, I need to step up my love game even more and give more, be there more, offer more, love them harder. Essentially, I thought compassion was loving people into treating me right, and if people weren't treating me right, I thought I wasn't doing a good enough job. So, long story short, what happened in this shift in awareness was I realized I am included in the field of compassion. I am just as worthy of compassion and kindness as everybody else that I've been endlessly giving it to. And what happened in this was a complete reorientation of the way I was living my life, where I started speaking differently. I started carrying myself differently. I started standing up for myself. I started showing up differently. I started not communicating with certain people anymore. I started communicating with people in a different way. I started not being afraid to speak my mind and to share my opinion and to show up in the radical authenticity of who I am. And there was a lot of fear associated with this, and the reason I had all that fear associated around showing up was from all my previous years of being a people pleaser and an endless giver and a doormat for everybody and their toxic behavior that wasn't being checked because I wasn't voicing that there was something wrong with how they were treating me. Now, I'm not outright saying you're a toxic person and you need to fix that, but when their toxic behavior involves me and engages with me, that's when it needs to be voiced. So what has sort of happened is it's became crystal clear, black and white apparent, people that are toxic. Not necessarily toxic people, but toxic behaviors, because I'm under the impression that even the most toxic, evil, narcissistic people in this world are souls seated behind a deep trench of toxicity that they can't escape from. They have a lot of work to do, essentially. So their toxic behavior doesn't excuse the sort of innocence of their soul, but nevertheless, that toxic behavior is bothering people, hurting people, putting other people down, and making other people's lives harder. So what I've started to realize, it's almost like, some people are lactose intolerant, but in this shift in awareness that I've had, it's like I've become bullshit intolerant, where I'm no longer putting up with childish behaviors. I'm no longer putting up with behaviors that, come on, let's get our shit together. Like, we're full-grown individuals. We're here. We have the capacity to learn, to change, to grow, to adjust and accommodate our behavior to live a life of love and authenticity and creativity and passion and joy. Why are we going around being toxic, treating people poorly, exploding on people, having no self-control, having no sense of consideration for other people, all this stuff? You know, I'm kind of venting here, but what I want to make clear for you guys is just some of the ways that you can start to eye out somebody who's acting in a toxic way. Now, I want to share with you something that happened literally just the other day with a close family member of mine that turned that light on in me and going, oh, okay, that is unacceptable behavior. So what happened, we're going to leave out names. She came over to the house and she was doing stuff, and she was just kind of being really snippy and snappy, and I was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, like that's you, that's who you are. And all of a sudden my cat came up and she started scratching on the corner of the wall, you know what I mean? And this family member of mine literally like yelled at my cat, hey, no, get down, don't do that. Like, yelled at her. And this family member does not associate with my cats at all and any of that stuff. And she has no right to talk to my cats like that. And that's just what I told her. I said, don't talk to my cats like that. Very firmly, like, hey, don't talk to my cats like that. Don't yell at them like that. Guys, she came undone. Absolute meltdown, emotional meltdown, just all this stuff. I'm not even gonna get into the details, but essentially what it was she couldn't like embody taking accountability for what she'd just done. She couldn't be wrong. And she came undone at me, and she yelled at me and screamed at me and exploded on me. And afterwards I was just like, are you okay? You know what I mean? Like, what is wrong here? And all it did, that behavior, that meltdown, it was like a 6-year-old having a tantrum because they were told they can't have another snack or they can't play with the phone or whatever, you know what I'm saying? It was like she had a meltdown. All because I asserted myself. All because I stood up for myself. And there was one point during it where she was like, you're making me really angry. And I'm like, no, like, you're getting angry at this because I, like, called you out. I'm not gonna just let you talk to my cats like that. So essentially what happened here was me standing up for myself resulted in her belittling me and exploding on me. And for the rest of the day, to be completely honest, I was in this completely emotionally like activated state where I was really tense and really frustrated and really like nervous. And I kind of inquired into it, like, what is this? Why am I so like activated right now? And what I tied it to was what happened that day when my family member blew up on me about telling her not to scream at my cats. It was a spitting image of what had happened when I was a child. Where when my dad or mom did something that bothered me, or specifically my dad, to be completely honest, when my dad did something that I didn't like, when I said, stop yelling at me, or stop doing that, or stop slamming things, or stop doing that, I got punished. AKA, I got punished when I stood up for myself. I got punished when I voiced my feelings. So from a very early age, I learned, oh, when I voice my feelings, I get put in timeout. It's not good to voice my feelings. And this resulted in the development of a pattern of when people are doing something I don't like, rather than standing up for myself and saying, I don't like this, what I would do would be to try to cater to them to make them stop doing what it was that I didn't like. I tried to ease the tension. I tried to avoid the conflict and not call them out, and not make it worse, and not make it worse. I tried to love them into not doing that thing anymore. Because if I stood up for myself and I said, hey, stop doing that, I don't like that you do that, I'd get in trouble. So I realized that the reason I felt so activated when my family member flipped out at me about calling her out for yelling at my cat, it had directly to do with my childhood. And what I realized was like the shift that's happened is I'm not willing to tolerate people putting me down for standing up for myself. Now, I felt in that moment, I felt like fear. I felt, oh no, she's really upset. I need to cower and shrink and play small. I need to shrink myself so that they calm down. I need to ease the tension somehow. So what I'm gonna do is abandon myself and how I feel and sort of coddle to how they're feeling. Oh no, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't have stood up for myself. I shouldn't have shared how I felt. Yeah, I'll quiet down. So, long story short, that's number one right there. If you want to spot toxic behavior, it's being punished for standing up for yourself. Being punished for voicing your opinion. For sharing how you feel. Now, it doesn't even necessarily have to be this emotional explosion either. It can also be you voice something and they're like, that's not a big deal. Why are you making such a big deal out of that? Does that really bother you? They gaslight you into thinking that the way you feel is invalid, that your feelings aren't true. There wasn't a problem until you said something, you know, that whole trip. So being punished for standing up for yourself is not only an emotional outrage when you stand up for yourself, but also being invalidated. Being treated like your feelings are a burden. Now, another sign that's become apparent to me is there's been two people in my life, and this person I was just sharing was one of them. There's been two people in my life very recently where I reached out through text. I shared with them how I felt about their behavior and that I wasn't willing to tolerate it. And then I'm like, you don't have a right to treat me like that, or my cat, in this instance, to treat my cats like that. Like, you don't have the right to just treat people however you want. You're a full-grown adult, and it's your responsibility to keep your together and not let your emotional instability boil over and affect other people's lives. Now, ultimately, that's going to happen. We can't really avoid that in entirety, but that's what is entailed in working on yourself, is coming into a position of realizing just because I'm upset, just because I don't feel good, doesn't mean I get to treat you poorly. And that's what these toxic people think is acceptable. Where if they're in a bad mood, they think that's a free ticket to treat you like crap. That's a free ticket to blow you off, to dump their crap onto you, to put you down, to belittle you, to say you're too much. But all the while, what it is that they can't stabilize their emotions, and it's kind of like I said, boiling over. It's bleeding over into how they treat you. So I reached out to these two people at two separate occasions. And I'm telling you guys, ever since I moved into this new way of being and thinking and feeling, the way I'm carrying myself and communicating with loved ones and friends and coworkers and strangers, everybody is in a completely different way. And I reached out to these two people and I said, you can't just treat me like this. I'm not going to accept that you just keep dumping all this stuff onto me. You know what I mean? And you want to know what happened? They didn't acknowledge it at all. They didn't respond. They pretended I didn't say anything. And I've talked to both of them since then, and they act like I didn't send that message. They didn't respond to it, and they didn't acknowledge it at all. So that's another thing right there. A key characteristic, a defining quality of toxic behavior. They don't acknowledge your boundaries. Now, like I said in the beginning, some of you may be like, this is obvious stuff of toxic behavior, but so many of us mistake those red flags as red roses and dismiss those toxic traits, thinking, well, they just had a bad day, or oh, they had a rough childhood, or they've been through so much, or maybe I was being over dramatic. We fiddle around with it. We make it make sense, as it's said. But what we're doing is we're abandoning the reality of how we feel. The rational, emotional, the heart-mind coherence of this behavior is unacceptable. And then when you voice it, like me with these two people recently, within the past couple months, when you voice it They don't even acknowledge it. You know the whole sweeping it under the rug? One of these people is the all-time king of sweeping things under the rug. Why don't you guys talk to me? Well, maybe it has something directly to do with the fact that every time you've done something horrible and we've called you out for it, you don't take accountability, you don't acknowledge it, and nothing changes. Maybe that's why we don't talk to you anymore. You know what I mean? I'm talking about like personal, familial stuff, you know, but I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to this. Sweeping things under the rug. You get in this blowout argument. And then a couple hours later, hey, how you doing? Hey, honey, how you doing? Do you have a good day? No, I'm gonna run to the store real quick. You need anything? Pretend like everything's fine. And you're over here like shell-shocked, like emotionally shell-shocked, like, did we not just like go to the depths of hell together in this talk and now you're fine? And I've seen this in crazy extents of playing it cool, acting like nothing happened, sweeping it under the rug. What this is a direct manifestation of not being able to take accountability and not acknowledging how you feel. They can just kind of dismiss and disregard how you feel. You know? Your attempts to voice your concerns, to voice your questions, to voice your boundaries, to draw a line in the sand and say, I'm not accepting this anymore. And then they just kind of look away. Yeah, right, okay, I'm going to go back to how I was being. I'm going to go back to being toxic. Toxic people put you down for voicing yourself and don't acknowledge your boundaries and sweep things under the rug. They pretend it didn't happen. They'll make you feel like your feelings are a burden. They'll make you feel like you're being overdramatic. It's profound. Like, the whole idea of like narcissistic people, I don't often use that word. I more so express like people are toxic. People present toxic behaviors. They act in toxic ways. But the idea behind being a narcissist is that when I see somebody, when I stumble upon somebody that I would call a narcissist, the reason I'm saying that is because there seems to be something so outlandishly wrong in their behavior, yet they aren't even aware of it. To the degree that it feels like there's something literally wrong with them. They aren't aware that they're doing anything wrong. Now, one of these two people that I have kind of like called out recently, one of these people feels cast out from the family. He literally said that to me. I feel like blacklisted from the family. It's like, well, maybe it has something to do with all the horrible things you've done and your lack of accountability for those things. And when we back away because we don't want to associate with somebody who's so toxic, your mentality is, well, screw you then, I don't need you. You know? And then you wonder why you're blacklisted from the family. It's, like I said a moment ago, it's profound, the demonstrations of, to be kind of blunt, emotional retardation that these individuals have. And I use that word in the direct, actual definition of what that word means. It's like you're not even aware of yourself. Emotional lack of accountability, emotional ignorance, I guess you could say. When somebody explodes on you, here's something I want you to realize. When somebody, obviously you want to take inventory, check yourself, see how you're acting, see how you're treating people, see how you're living your life. But when you know that you're living your life in accordance with your higher self and your highest good and truth and love and authenticity, when somebody blows up on you, it's very easy when you had that people-pleasing dynamic as a child to feel, oh, I'm doing something wrong here. I need to, like, I'm sorry. I stood up for myself. I'm sorry I did that. I'm sorry. You know, you cater to and coddle their explosion. But what I want you to know is that their emotional explosion says more about them than it does about you. It honestly has nothing to do with you. If anything, you're being a catalyzer, a sort of catalyst for their emotional instability. And since they can't handle it, who do they take it out on? You. They take it out on you because they think you are why they're blowing up. Meanwhile, they aren't aware that the reason they're blowing up is because they haven't yet developed a sort of structural framework of how to handle their emotions. They can't handle their emotions. That's why they're angry. That's why they're blowing up. So somebody blowing up, it's like me in this instance with this family member that blew up on me for standing up for my cats. I felt like, oh, I'm scared and I need to I felt that like scared inner child feeling come over me. But instead of sort of giving into that and thinking, she's blowing up because oh yeah, you're right, I shouldn't have stood up for my cats. Keep screaming at them. You're right. Keep being a bitch. You know? Instead of giving into that sort of ignorant, naive, innocent little inner child that was raised in such a toxic dynamic, I owned how I felt. I embodied the state of no. Like, I see you having an emotional explosion over there, but that's not an excuse to treat me or my cats or anybody else like crap, like they're lesser than you, like it's their fault that you can't handle your emotions. I owned that resistance. And see, that resistance creates what's called polarization. And I've shared this in a past recent video, talking about not being a pushover. The pushover, when you're not a pushover, what you do is you push back. When somebody crosses your boundaries, and you push back, aka you stand up for yourself, that person comes undone, unraveled. They have a nutty, they lose their mind, they blow up, they throw a tantrum essentially. They get all mad, they try to scare you. You know? Think of back when you were a child, if your parents slammed things around, raised their voice, pointed at you and got right in your face, you know, that whole one. Maybe that triggered some of you. What did you just say to me? You know what I mean? That behavior is a sort of intimidation tactic to try to literally get you to give up and play small. So, not only am I trying to emphasize the telltale signs of toxic behavior, you know, being punished for standing up for yourself, not having your feelings acknowledged, being made out to be like your feelings are a burden or aren't true, all that stuff, but I'm also trying to emphasize in the same moment how critical it is for you to push back against it. Don't let them walk on you anymore. You know, and it's I made a funny example in a past video talking about even something as simple as like you're hanging out with a friend and they keep slamming your car door every time they get in, and you're like, oh my god, every time they shut it, and you're like, I'm not gonna tell them to like they don't know and I don't want to make a scene and all that. No, dude. Tell them, hey, do you mind not slamming my door every time you get in? Lean into the tension. Push back in a healthy way. Because a lot of these toxic individuals, and I'm not saying your friend that slams the door is a toxic individual, I'm using it as an example to portray the importance of standing up for yourself. A lot of these toxic individuals don't even know what healthy behavior looks like. So me, you know, in my family member's defense, the story I keep sharing, me standing up for myself and moreover my cat was like me, to her, me being rude, me being outlandish, me being unacceptable, me being, you can't talk to me like that, you know what I'm saying? She didn't even recognize or even consider that where I'm coming from is a healthy state of mind. You can't just treat people and animals like crap because you're not feeling good. It's not an excuse. She doesn't even see that. She doesn't even understand that that's a possibility. So I'm being out of line, and that sort of further accounts for her blowing up on me, because she doesn't even know that she's in a toxic state of mind. So what I want the real essence of this video to be is to point out some of those key characteristics of toxic behavior. Now, like I said, these aren't necessarily toxic people. These are toxic behaviors that these people are representing. I'm not excusing them of their behavior, but what I'm saying is that to not tolerate toxic behavior to the best of your ability, and what it takes to not tolerate that toxic behavior anymore is, first of all, to be able to recognize it, which hopefully I've helped elucidate to you in this video, but also to be willing to push against it. To be willing to know and be standing so firmly in your worth and in your security of what you know and how you feel things should be, that you're willing to call out the BS, to not put up with it anymore. And I'm telling you right now, guys, your entire life will transform when you start standing up for yourself, when you start polarizing the world. When you stand in the authenticity of you, your whole life is going to transform. You're going to carry yourself differently. People are going to look at you differently, talk to you differently, think about you differently. Yeah, people will leave. And it might hurt your feelings, and it will. It'll hurt. It'll be scary. It'll be sad. It'll be hard. But those people are leaving as a result of you loving yourself. Look at it like that, and it will dampen the pain of them leaving. They left because you love yourself. So why the hell would you want them around in the first place? Not only will people leave, but people will come into your life too. Your vibe attracts your tribe. When you start being you, people will come into life because now they can see you. Now that you're standing up for yourself, now that you're being you, you're raising your hand up in the ocean of beings. And those who are looking for you can find you now that you're honoring who you are. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope this video helped just sort of, like I said, elucidate and shed light on some of the key characteristics that define toxic behavior. And I hope I also inspired you to stop being a pushover, to stop playing quiet, to stop tolerating that toxic behavior, and step into the power of pushing back. Not being afraid to lean into that tension. And if you do so, your entire life will transform. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed. And if you did, consider liking and subscribing because it really helps me out. Trust me. So yeah, with that said, I'll see you all in the next video.